Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stephen King Cast, one man's musings on the works of Stephen King. Each week I'll review one entry in the bibliography of Stephen King in the chronological order of publication, and this week I will be reviewing the 2019 remake of Pet Sematary, the adaptation of Pet Sematary. And at the original time of release, this episode was the 200th episode of the Stephen King Cast, just so you're aware. And without further ado, enjoy the episode.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, constant listeners, to episode 200. Technically speaking, there's been more than 200 episodes with bonus episodes and such, but this is officially the 200th episode, which is an incredible moment. Like, this is crazy. When I started this podcast, I didn't expect that I'd get to 200 episodes back in 2014, but here we are. And on this evening or morning or afternoon, whenever you're listening to it, this day's worth of episode, I'm going to discuss some Stephen King news. I'm going to read some emails, go through some iTunes reviews, and I will review the Pet Sematary movie. So up first, what I'm going to do in the last episode back in February, and here we are in April, so I apologize for the wait, guys, but with the Pet Sematary movie having just come out, I thought that it was time. In fact, I apologize that I wasn't able to get to the review earlier. I wasn't able to see the movie until Sunday night, and now it is Wednesday, so just life isn't as easy for me to be able to review these things as quickly as I would like. But I did see it within the week, so that is a plus. But last time I recorded an episode and put it out, one of the news bits that I had covered was the announcement that CBS All Access, which is definitely making a name for itself with the Star Trek show and the Twilight Zone, what's going to be joining that is The Stand. There will be a Stand miniseries. I can't remember if it's going to be a series or a miniseries. I don't remember. But I had asked everyone out there to fan cast it. If you could cast the show, who would you cast it with? Who are the actors that would play your favorite characters? So I had a few responses. Up first is from Cosmo, who writes, Stu, Emil Hirsch. Is that how you pronounce his name? Emil Hirsch. Franny, Zoe Deutsch, Harold, Mateo Arias, Larry, Donald Glover, Nick, Ansel Elgort. I don't know if you can have an Ansel Elgort and an Emil Hirsch in the same movie. I think that the space-time would just fold into itself. Tom would be Keir Gilchrist, Ralph would be Jack Black, Glenn would be Danny Glover, Nadine would be Catherine Watterson, Joe/Leo would be Atticus Schaefer, Lloyd will be David Anders, Trash Can Man would be David Hornsby, Randall Flagg, Brendan Sexton III, Mother Abigail, Nichelle Nichols. So of these people, I know of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I can't really comment on many of them. But Cosmo, thank you for writing. Okay, and then we have Steve, who writes, I spent hours on this, and I think that's a winner. I think that I nailed my flag. Oldman, spoiler alert, Oldman can do anything. See True Romance, and he's one of the best character actors in history. I put a few big names in to anchor it and filled the rest in with those who are great and have the likeness if necessary. Tell me what you think. Mother Abigail, Viola Davis, Stu Redman, Joaquin Phoenix, Franny, Kate Winslet, Larry Underwood, Dean Winters, Nadine Cross, Crystal Tini, Harold, Eller Coltrane, Nick Andros, Josh Hutcherson, Tom Coleman, Sam Coleman, who played young Hodor, Paul, Richard Jenkins. I don't know who Paul is. It's not ringing a bell. But Richard Jenkins is a fantastic actor, and I think that he would play an amazing Glenn. Flag is Gary Oldman. Lloyd, Domhnall Gleeson. Polk, Paul Dano. Trash, Crispin Glover, The Kid, Michael Shannon. Okay. I do know most of these people, and those are definitely interesting picks. And then we have Clay, who writes Long Days and Pleasant Nights. I was very excited to hear your return to Stephen King Cast. I'm sorry to hear about the poor health of your dog. It's always a hard time. My wife is still recovering from the loss of her cat last year, who she had for 16 plus years. Speaking of animals, I finally finished the Tommyknockers. It suffered from what more than a few of Stephen King's works suffer from, which was a slow, verbose burn before the Big Bang. Overall, it was an enjoyable experience. The imagery of the living dog battery really got me. Okay, and then Clay just responds to an email about Oi. I don't want to get into too many spoilers, but this is I had asked him to share something with me personally about his thoughts, and I just don't want to share it. Well, actually, is there any? I just didn't want to get into any spoilers. So Oi is a character from the Dark Tower, for those of you who don't know who Oi is. Okay, so Clay is not a fan of Oi. And he says that my biggest beef with Oi is that he talks. A dog is a dog, and I get a dog. I feel for a dog. Oi is not a dog, so mayhap. That's why I find it hard to sympathize with Oi. Over Christmas, I spoke to my brother, who has only read the Dark Tower series and nothing else by Stephen King. Weird, I know, about Oi. Without any prompt from me, he proclaimed Oi to be the Jar Jar Binks of the Dark Tower, an exact echo to my statement in my previous email. All right, don't at me, guys. All right, I didn't say that. That wasn't me. That was Clay. If Oywood had simply been a dog, I can almost guarantee that I personally would sing his name at the foot of the tower. Speaking of the Tommyknockers, I listened to that episode of the podcast and couldn't agree more with your description of Sister Anne as cartoonish. This got me thinking. Why not an animated adaptation of Stephen King's works? An anime version of The Dark Tower would be breathtakingly beautiful and 100% true to its source. I agree with that. I think that would be the next step that they need to take with Stephen King's works. We've already seen an illustrated adaptation with N, not also to mention the graphic novels of The Stand and The Dark Tower. An animated adaptation seems like a natural progression. Lastly, the fan casting of The Stand. I don't know celebrities well enough to do full casting, but I'll toss out a few. Flag, Jim Carrey, a dark Joker-esque character exploration of the walking dude. I think Carey's transformative acting abilities could have immense potential. Nick Andros, Rami Malek, all right. Highly unlikely as he's a little busy these days, but playing a deaf mute could be a role that easily fill with the very expressive eyes that he has. Larry Underwood, Bradley Cooper, why not? Well, he may be a little busy too. Glenn, stick with me on this one. Stephen King. It's not a huge role. He's been a teacher in real life. Retired associate professor of sociology wouldn't be too much of a stretch for him. How great would this be, am I right? Keep up the good work. I anxiously wait the next podcast. There will be water if God wills. It's safe travels. Clayton of Indiana. Thank you, Clay. Will writes, Dear Constant Reader, first, please accept my apologies for taking so long to respond to your letter. Things happen to be fairly hectic on my end at the time of your writing, and yours was an email that unfortunately slipped through the cracks. With regard to my expectations for It Chapter 2, they grow with every passing day. I followed the casting news as they were putting a new crew together, and by and large, I'd say that they've assembled a solid team of actors. I eagerly await the first official trailer whenever they end up releasing it. I was almost fooled a month ago or so, but what turned out to be a very well-edited fan-made trailer that spliced together footage of Chapter 1 and some of the actors' previous films. In a way, it's surprising there hasn't been more promotion yet for the movie, particularly given how well the first one performed, but there's still very nearly 6 months to go, so there's time for them to ramp it up. I don't know how likely it'll be, but I do hope that they include some of the more cosmic, fantastical elements of the novel, the turtle, the macroverse, etc. It would serve as a way of building the film's foundation without coming off as a mere retread with now older characters. How they'll approach the climax is what I'm most curious about. All in all, it's one of a handful of movies coming out this year that I'll be certain to see. I've also heard good things about the new Pet Sematary. I'll get to that later. But as a novel I've yet to read, I've probably hold off on seeing that one right away. I'll also be sure to leave an iTunes review for you soon. All the best, Will. Will, thank you for writing in. I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see some sort of It trailer very, very soon. I think that it was April, the year that It came out, Chapter 1. I think that it was April when we saw the first poster, followed very, very quickly by the teaser trailer, which was, if you remember, it was fantastic. So because the sequel has the same release date, I think my daughter is up and trying to come down the stairs. Anyway, so because the second movie is coming out at the same time frame, I would imagine that the marketing would probably be the same. That would just be my guess. And then we have Brett, who writes, "Howdy, fellow constant reader. I was just listening to your re-release of Pet Sematary when the thought occurred to me. So spoiler alert for Pet Sematary. What if the death of Church isn't what starts it all, but is in fact the death of Pascal? What if the ghost of Pascal is not the force of good that I've always thought that he was, but in fact just another part of the evil force that haunts the Micmac burial ground?" Yeah, she's definitely trying to get down here. We recently converted her crib into a toddler bed, and the last couple of nights she's been fighting sleep really, really hard. But she's not crying, so that's good. So anyway, Brett continues to write, "He is the one that sparks the curiosity of Lewis. What's the first thing that human nature makes you want to do if someone tells you not to do something? Want to do it. Pascal shows him where he needs to go, show him the deadfall, making Lewis less reluctant to go over when Judd leads him there. That it isn't Judd that leads Gage being killed. We know the Force can see into people's dark past, but what if we can also see into a person's dark future? What will happen if it applies a pressure to a person? The creeds were marked from the moment they arrived in Ludlow and stepped into that house. It's Pascal coming to Ellie in her dreams and showing her things that sends Rachel back to be killed. By the time he does this, Rachel is already too far away, and Lewis's plan is already underway to be able to stop it." Okay, so this is spoilers, and Brett's going to get to his thoughts on the new Pet Sematary movie before I get to my thoughts on the Pet Sematary movie, but this will whet your appetite until I get to later on in this episode for my review. My thoughts on the new Pet Sematary were the first time I saw it, I didn't like it. But the second time I saw it was, what if the novel we have read and its 1989 adaptation weren't this story? This is the story pulled from another world, say an adaptation of the novel pulled through a doorway from Roland's Midworld. It'll be interesting to hear your thoughts on it. Keep up the good work you're doing and keep the podcast going whenever you can, like you have been. I know that it's hard. Life takes over, and it's hard to get around to doing it. Until next time, Cy. Cheers, Brett. Yeah, Brett, I am treating Pet Sematary just like that. Oh, someone's up and calling me. I gotta go, guys. I'll be right back. And I'm back. Man, she is a lunatic lately, but it's a lot of fun. I wouldn't have it any other way. Okay, so that's all I have for emails, guys. Thank you for everyone who wrote in, and if you haven't done so already, feel free to write into stephenkingcast@yahoo.com and continue fan casting the stand and give me your takes and your thoughts. And up next, what I have are iTunes reviews. So I cannot do this without iTunes reviews. The more iTunes reviews I get, the higher up in the search for Stephen King, when people search for Stephen King, the Stephen King cast is. So the more reviews, the greatly appreciated. So I have a few. The first one is by Smithku, who writes, "My favorite Stephen King podcast, 5 stars. Great, thank you. The analysis provided by Constant Reader is second to none. There is a depth to the discussion that is missing in other podcasts. I don't always agree with him and occasionally think he is being a bit pessimistic or hypercritical, but his opinion is always grounded in reason. You can tell he knows his stuff and loves King. Also, I love hearing his dogs in the background occasionally during the podcasts. Haha." So thank you, Smithku, and thank you for the kind words. Then we have Cosmo Share, who writes, "Essential listening for Stephen King fans and otherwise bibliographically woo. It's like the phenomenon from like 3 years ago. Listening to these elegant and persuasive deep dive analyses of Stephen King's has become my completion ritual of a King book. In fact, I don't feel finished with any novel of his until I've listened to Constant Reader's corresponding episodes. The host carries a radical idea into his approach of the show, Let's get serious discussion on modern popular literature, going to use a certain zeal usually reserved strictly for classic or literary novels. King is a master commemorator and storyteller of our times, and Constant Reader lets us know it and then some. Please keep making magic. Thank you, Cosmo. Cosmo, thank you for writing in. That's an awesome review. I really, really appreciate it. Then we have Lena Boo, who writes, look no further for all things King. This podcast never fails in comprehensive coverage of King's work. Objective, insightful, entertaining, and thorough. Definitely a solid addition to your subscriptions. Thank you. Then we have Drunk Andy 24/7, who writes, great way to revisit King's work. I love Stephen King and have read mostly all of his work and movies based on books. Listening to the Stephen King cast is a great way to dive back into the books and movies and go over things. I look forward to all episodes and new ones as they come out. Then we have West Coast Cholo, who writes, excellent book reviews. Great podcast to listen to if you're a new Stephen King fan. Constant Reader is able to recognize the King formula that makes his novels so great and point them out in case you missed them or if you never really thought about it the same way. Thank you. Then we have the Yank 77477, who writes, best Stephen King podcast out there, by far the best. He covers each book collection in chronological order, adaptations, both film and TV, even bonus episode linking books to other books and to the entire King universe. He also covered Joe Hill, who is Stephen King's son. Anyone who is a King fan should either start with his first episode and work forward, or pick their favorite King book, find the episode for that book, and listen. Mike. Thank you, Mike. That's awesome. It's a great review. I really these are awesome to read. Thank you, guys. This really makes my day. Then we have Brittany Loves Podcast, who writes, King of King Fancasts. Constant Reader, the host of the Stephen King cast, is the perfect person to take you through Stephen King's over. His analyses are always interesting, and he's sure to introduce you to themes, details, and background tidbits even the most ardent King fan may not have heard or thought of before. The podcast isn't without dashes of humor either, especially with the music selection. And another bonus is the host's voice. It's so even and earnest, it's soothing. Thank you. I actually binge episodes as a way to cope with anxiety and racing thoughts. Long story short, if you're looking for the best Stephen King fan cast out there, look no further than the Stephen King cast. It's a great, informative podcast made for King fans by a true King fan. Brittany, thank you so much. Then we have the Fog 98, who says, just stumbled upon this podcast and love it. I've been a huge fan of King for decades. Recently started from the beginning of King's titles and listened to the audio versions of his books in order of publication. This podcast will be a constant companion as I go through them again. Thank you. Then we have the Decimator. She's up again. Who writes? I don't know if you guys can hear her or not, but I'm going to have to put a pin in it, though you're not going to notice. That'll be gone for a while. Okay, I am back, and hopefully this time it has stuck. She couldn't find her elephant blanket. She needed her elephant blanket. It was under one of her other blankets in her bed, along with a toy lamp, a few books, some Band-Aids that she likes to hold on to, all of her animal collection, and just random assortment of items from her room. So she needed all of that in her bed, and she couldn't find her elephant blanket. But I think that I have saved the day, so hopefully she will drift off to sleep soon enough. Okay, then we have the Decimator, who writes, recent subscriber, but everything I've listened to so far has been excellent. Reminds me of what I love about Stephen King. You also, guys, I'm sorry, this is a very distractible episode. You might hear the click and clanking of some noise in the background. This is the addition of our furry co-hosts, which have been referenced already in this episode. And I do say furry co-hosts. So I know in the last episode I made mention of the fact that one of my dogs back on Valentine's Day started having seizures, and it got really scary when we went to an all-night vet, and the recommendation was that I was going to have to put the dog down. But we have been keeping him on a strict diet and trying to get some more exercise in, and he's been receiving some insulin twice a day, and he's on some other meds, and the little guy has made, I don't want to call it a full turnaround, but he's he's night and day from where he was back on Valentine's Day. He's still with us, which is what matters. So I had asked everyone for some thoughts and prayers so I could have a little bit more time and our family could have some more time with him. And thank you, because it seemed to have worked. And here he comes to say hi to all of us. He's doing good. He's a good little guy. And my daughter, who refuses to sleep right now, loves him dearly. And I'm not ready for them to say goodbye to each other. So all is well. In an episode where we're going to be talking about dead pets, I'm very grateful that I have both of mine with me, smelling up this place and making background noise that will endear me to some listeners and drive some listeners nuts. Okay, then we have an excellent podcast for King readers by Gunslinger 19. The Stephen King Cast is a terrific podcast for all King readers, constant and occasional alike. The host, going by the pseudonym Constant Reader, summarizes and analyzes each work in a thorough manner, providing commentary and insights that may not have been initially apparent to the listener. Even if one disagrees with the host's rankings or interpretations of King's work, his insights are always thought-provoking. Moreover, in keeping with a podcast focusing on the music-loving Stephen King, each episode features music fitting the work showcased. All in all, I highly recommend this podcast. Then we have a really fun listen for any constant reader from me011400. Thanks for all the hours of enjoyment listening to interesting ideas about and enthusiastic cheers for Mr. King's awesome stories. And then lastly, we have LW0056, who writes, and this is the best heading, what's with the snoring dog, ? Exclamation point, ? 5 stars. I do want to state that he wrote 5 stars. This is a great podcast, but the snoring dog did not enhance the Pet Sematary episodes. Please don't do that again. I'm sorry. This probably was a first-time listener who had listened to the re-release of the Pet Sematary episode that I had put out. Without understanding that the dogs do make appearances and that they are kind of like a staple of the podcast. So I get it. I get background noise in podcasts. They can drive me nuts. But at the same time, it's... work is busy, and then I get home, and then it's, daughter time, and the dogs and I and my wife, we just don't have time to hang out with the dogs as much as we used to. So when I'm recording, it's important for me to be able to just... Oh, God. And my other dog, my non-diabetic dog, just got into the trash and has a bunch of toilet paper in her mouth. I'll be right back again. So this is just life, guys. This is just life living itself and exemplified in this podcast right now. Okay. So, guys, if you haven't done so already, like I said, the iTunes reviews really, really help me out. It would be greatly appreciated if you could take a few minutes, if you haven't done so already, to just leave a quick review if you like the podcast. If you don't like the podcast, then you probably shouldn't be listening to it, and you should be doing much better things with your life. But if you do like the podcast, then please leave a review. Okay, guys. Up next, we have some Stephen King news to discuss before we get to the Pet Sematary review. And up first, this is a big one. Had I had more time, I would have done an episode entirely on some of this news, because this news, what I'm about to get to next, is big news. Of all of the stories that have yet to be adapted for the big screen, I would probably argue that the biggest one is not Stephen King's story alone, but it's one that he had co-written with Peter Straub, and that, of course, being The Talisman. It has been, the cinematic rights had been acquired by Steven Spielberg many moons ago, and the pairing it's a perfect one. Steven Spielberg producing the Talisman is definitely that's an amazing thought. Unfortunately, we are not getting a Steven Spielberg directed movie. We are getting one that is directed by one of the directors of The Handmaid's Tale, which is a great show. It is not what I would consider a feel-good show. It's coming out this summer, and it's one that my wife and I watch dutifully every summer, and I'm looking forward to it, but it's definitely a hard hang. And let's see. So Mike Barker is the director, and this is from Den of Geek. And let's see who wrote this article. John Savadra writes. Stephen King and Peter Straub's fan favorite fantasy novel The Talisman is being adapted for the big screen by Amblin Entertainment, and the movie has finally found its director. The Handmaid's Tale veteran Mike Barker is set to direct a script by Chris Sparling. Frank Marshall is producing, with Michael Wright executive producing. The Talisman tells the story of a 12-year-old boy named Jack Sawyer who tries to save his mother from dying of cancer by finding a mysterious crystal known as the Talisman. His quest leads him to the Territories, a universe parallel to our own that's full of dangers. King co-wrote the novel with Straub, as well as a sequel called Black House. The book was originally going to be adapted into a TV series, but Amblin has since changed its mind, perhaps after the big money It Chapter 1 made back in 2017. Longtime King fan Josh Boone, whose next movie is New Mutants, maybe, was originally set to write the film adaptation and possibly direct. Never fear, though, as Boone still has 2 King projects on the docket, including the Stan TV series coming to CBS All Access, as well as a movie based on Revival, the Lovecraftian novel that is sort of King's version of Frankenstein. In the meantime, The Talisman checks off the Amblin revival fever that has taken pop culture by storm since the arrival of Netflix's Stranger Things. That is, movies about kids going on adventures and fighting monsters. The It remake, which is now the highest grossing horror film of all time after grossing more than $600 million at the box office, focused on the Young Losers Club and was all the better for it. No release date has been set for The Talisman, but we'll update this piece as soon as we know more about the project. So, like I said, this is I'm very excited about the idea of The Talisman being turned into a movie. I just hope that it just gets it right. There needs to be a lot of conversation that goes into making this the right adaptation. They're definitely going to have to trim a lot if they're going to make it into one movie. So they need to make sure that they know exactly which parts they need to trim. Because there's not a lot of fat. For a book that's as thick as The Talisman is, it is a lean story that takes us across not one world but 2 worlds, with every character mattering in some way or another. It matters to the story and matters to Jack. So I want to see Oatley, the Sunlight Gardener's Home for Wayward Children. That definitely needs to be there. That's some Pinocchio, nightmare fuel that needs to be in there. If they cut Wolf out, I will go on a rampage. I don't know what they could cut out. So I don't envy this director or the writer because they have some hard choices ahead of them. Because I feel as though they're going to have to cut something out in order to not feel as though the movie itself is being rushed. So I don't know, but I am excited for it. Even though I have doubts, I am excited. One thing I have doubts about, but am not excited for, is this. And this is from Polygon.com, from Matt Patches, who writes the following. Amazon's Dark Tower series is actually happening, but with a new gunslinger. The maligned filmed adaptation isn't stopping a reboot from Blaine the Monowing forward. Roland's destiny is to quest after the Dark Tower in perpetuity. So too is Hollywood's. Stephen King's epic fantasy series is officially moving forward to Amazon under the eye of MRC, which produced the recent film adaptation. The man in black will flee across the desert, and the gunslinger will follow once more. I'm going to interject here. No, he won't. And no, they didn't do that the last time. And as Matt Patches will get into, we'll talk about what this adaptation is actually going to be. But there will be no desert, there will be no gunslinger, and he will not be fleeing the man in black. Despite a franchise sinking box office return of $113 million worldwide on a $60 million budget, and negative reviews from every corner of the critical sphere, including this very podcast, settling in the end with a 13% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. 2017's The Dark Tower didn't dissuade rights holders from forgetting the face of their father. The Stephen King boom is real, and the Dark Tower books would find life on screen, even if it's a 40-inch one in front of a couch. Though a theoretical TV series of King's book is percolated after the disastrous film version, in January 2018, Amazon Studios head Jennifer Salke said that while she hadn't read any actual scripts for the Dark Tower series, the plan was very much alive. There was little word of it, or when the project might spring to life, or how long the company would have to wait until a relaunch of the property. The answer was not very long at all, according to Variety. Glenn Mazzara, The Walking Dead, is on board as a showrunner with a pilot for a series in the process of casting up, making good on a rumor that the show could start filming as early as April. The report suggests that Idris Elba and Matthew McConaughey are out as Roland Deschain, the gunslinger, and Randall Flagg, the Man in Black, respectively, though there were early rumors that the series would directly reap the A-list benefits of the film. Instead, with the series expected to adapt the early stories from the universe, like those featured in the prequel novel Wizard and Glass, the casting skews younger. 25-year-old British actor Sam Strike is reportedly playing Roland in the pilot, with Black Klansman actor Jasper Pakonen co-starring as Flagg. This is an aggressive play by Amazon. I don't agree with that. In the land grab scramble for eyeballs in the wake of Game of Thrones' final season, along with The Dark Tower, the streaming audio is also in the works on a Lord of the Rings series set during the Second Age and an adaptation of Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time books. Amazon isn't thinking twice about the lingering effect of the Dark Tower movie, which, after years and years of development, passing from J.J. Abrams to Ron Howard to Akiva Goldsman, sought to remix the mythology into a single digestible feature film. That didn't work, but in today's blockbuster a week pace, no one will remember either. Though the loss of Elba is enormous for fans of the series, the new Ka-Tet means a future for the series that could carve out anything King put on the page. Ka, much like the reboot cycle, is a wheel. Okay, here are my thoughts. I'm not into this. I thought about it, and I understand, they're going to be doing the story chronologically from Roland's perspective, okay? So we are going to no doubt be getting the Gunslinger test from Book 1, The Gunslinger, and then follow up immediately with the events of Book 4, Wizard and Glass. I don't like this. I don't like this because I don't believe that flashbacks are meant to be taken out of their place within a story as the story is told. I have been on the record stating that I'm fine when changes are made to a story. Okay, so this is coming across entirely hypocritical. I get it. But the Star Wars series of movies would not work if they were told in the order in which they chronologically occurred. And I don't believe in watching these types of movies in that kind of order, because let's just take Star Wars. Let's take the Star Wars saga, all right? Episode 4 is the first one that is made. Episode 4 through 6 are the ones that occur first for us as viewers, okay? Then episodes 1 through 3. Episodes 1 through 3 are informed by and or comment upon what we know of characters and events in the subsequent chapters, which we have already seen, though they take place later on down the timeline. As a result, beats play out differently and characters' stories unfold differently based on what we know, right? Similarly, with the Dark Tower series, the reason why Wizard and Glass and those early stories of Roland work as well as they do is because they serve to contextualize and function as a juxtaposition to the character that we already know, the character who is at that point set in stone. To show the story of Roland in his more formative years leading to the hardened man that he will become is not what the Gunslinger story or the Dark Tower story truly is.
Running a business is hard enough, so why make it harder with a dozen different apps that don't talk to each other? One for sales, another for inventory, a separate one for accounting. Before you know it, you are drowning in software instead of growing your business. This is where Odoo comes in. Odoo is the only business software you'll ever need. It's an all-in-one, fully integrated platform that handles everything. CRM, accounting, inventory, e-commerce, HR, and more. No more app overload. No more juggling logins. Just one seamless system that makes work easier. And the best part, Odoo replaces multiple expensive platforms for a fraction of the cost. It's built to grow with your business, whether you are just starting out or already scaling up. Plus, it's easy to use, customizable, and designed to streamline every process, so you can focus on what really matters, running your business. Thousands of businesses have made the switch, so why not you? Try Odoo for free at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com.
It's the story of Roland as he is. And for those of you who have finished The Dark Tower, that's kind of the point. That Roland is Roland. That he's set in stone time and again. So, I'm not into this. I'm not into Teen Bop Roland. I don't have faith in the production company to deliver on this. This is now the second strike against the property because it just seems to me that when given the opportunity to make the thing that they want to make, they're not making it like the thing that it's based on. I don't like the Harry Potter movies because they're too slavish or lavish to the source material, especially the first two. They're just beat for beat remakes. And I don't think that it's a good rhythm, and I don't think that it allows for the movie to stand as movies. I think Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings is a solid adaptation that is true to the heart and soul of the books, but functions as movies and lives and breathes as movies, and it feels very cinematic. But what they did with The Dark Tower, the movie, just like they said, to make it digestible and bland, it was a bad move. And Game of Thrones was referenced in Matt Patch's article, but Game of Thrones. Okay, so I can only say this from someone that has read a lot about A Song of Ice and Fire and someone that has listened to a lot of podcasts about A Song of Ice and Fire without actually reading A Song of Ice and Fire. But A Game of Thrones is based on and follows closely the events of George R.R. Martin's story. Of course, with changes here and there, but it's not as if they make it all Jon Snow's story, or if they change people's backstory, or they change the timeline. I know that people get aged up and down. Characters are sort of combined here and there. Other characters are omitted. Certain plot points don't play out exactly the same, and that's all fine and good, but the story still resembles the story. And this, to me, though it's going to pick up at a different point in the timeline of Roland, it just doesn't, to me, say, okay, we have the rights to the Dark Tower, we're going to do the Dark Tower. Do the thing that you're making, that you want to make, not some weird version of the thing that you want to make. So I'm not excited. I will watch it. I don't know if I will watch much of it. But I don't... This does not appeal to me. And I'm sorry for anyone that is excited, and I don't want to rain on anyone's parade. But I just can't get excited about that. Then we have something I am excited about. Talking about changes that I'm totally fine with. We have Hulu announces, this is from Will Thorne from Variety, who writes, Hulu announces Castle Rock Season 2 cast led by Lizzie Kaplan. Hulu has announced a star-studded cast for Season 2 of Castle Rock, which will be led by Tim Robbins. Stephen King alum Tim Robbins. Lizzie Kaplan and Elsie Fisher from 8th grade. Great movie. Season 2 will center around Annie Wilkes, Stephen King's nurse from hell, who gets waylaid in the town of Castle Rock as a feud between two Warren clans come to a boil. Kaplan will play Wilkes, a superfan battling to overcome mental health issues. Wilkes is the central antagonist in King's 1987 novel Misery, and the character was played by Kathy Bates in the 1990 film adaptation. Bates won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for the role. Robin's character, Reginald Pop Merrill is the patriarch of King's iconic crime family. Pop is dying of cancer and in a reckoning with his family as John Ace Merrill, who will be played by Garrett Hedlund, trying to take over and is threatening a fragile peace with nearby Jerusalem's Lot. There's a lot to this, a lot going on. Elsie Fisher, meanwhile, will portray Wilkes' homeschooled teenage daughter Joy, who is starting to have questions about her mother's sanity. The cast for the forthcoming season also includes Yusra Warsama, Captain Philip Starr, Barked Abdi as Matthew Allen. Castle Rock, which premiered in 2018 of July, is Hulu's second series from the King universe. The partnership began with 11/22/63, based on a novel of the same name. The streamer reported that within the first day of its launch, Castle Rock became the most successful first-season Hulu original when considering consumption and reach. The show comes from executive producers and showrunners Sam Shaw and Dustin Tomlinson. J.J. Abrams, Mark Lafferty, Ben Stevenson, Liz Glotzter, and King himself also serve as executive producers. Bad Robot Productions, in association with Warner Brothers Television, produces. So for all of my thoughts on Castle Rock Season 1, go back and listen to those episodes. I had a great time listening to Castle Rock, and I had a great time talking to Dustin Tomlinson, one of the showrunners just listed there. So this looks like they are, just taking iconic characters from Stephen King and just kind of mixing and matching as they go. This kind of sounds the way Brian Fuller played with the characters from the Hannibal mythos when crafting Hannibal, without directly adapting the stories beat for beat. It was kind of more of a remix that worked for me. So that's an example of change actually working, because its truth was authentic to the source material in a spiritual way, if not a plot and sequential way. So I'm excited for that. I think that is gonna work. It actually kind of sounds like a season of Fargo. And seeing as how I haven't gotten a fix of Fargo for a while, I'll take my Fargo in Castle Rock Season 2. And then, sorry guys. Lastly, we have from Deadline, written by Denise Petsky, Julianne Moore to headline Apple drama series Lisey's Story from Stephen King and J.J. Abrams. Apple has given a straight-to-series order to Lisey's Story, an 8-hour limited series written and executive produced by Stephen King and starring Oscar winner Julianne Moore. The series hails from J.J. Abrams' Bad Robot Productions and Warner Brothers Television's Moore will also executive produce. King wrote every episode of the series, which is based on his best-selling 2006 novel. This is a deeply personal thriller that follows Lisey 2 years after the death of her husband. A series of events causes Lisey to begin facing amazing realities about him that she had repressed and forgotten. So my thoughts on this are, I'm happy for Stephen King that he gets to tell this story again. This time in POG form, in television form, and that he gets to write all the episodes. I like that he and J.J. Abrams have this partnership. And this is a big, Apple Plus, I think it's being called, is definitely starting to roll out its announcements. So this is a big first get. And Julianne Moore will be great as Lisey. That's a great actress to cast in the role. I'm just not excited about it because I didn't like Lisey's Story. Maybe this will be the Mr. Mercedes of Lisey's Story. I did not like Mr. Mercedes, and I very much liked Mr. Mercedes, the television show. So maybe seeing it in a different medium will make me actually appreciate the story more. So I'm going into this one with an open mind. And I will definitely share all of my thoughts as we start to get closer to that date. Okay, guys, so the time has come. The time has come for me to talk about my thoughts on 2019's adaptation of Stephen King's 1982 novel, Pet Sematary. So I think that the best way for me to do this is to... Well, let me back up a little bit. So I know that there's been talks about a Pet Sematary remake for years. And then it started gaining traction a couple years ago, and the directors of Starry Eyes were attached to it, and that did not fill me with a lot of confidence. the cast started to fill out, and I said, okay, I'm excited about this. This is good. Jason Clarke and Amy Seimetz, and then John Lithgow, which cracked me up and I thought would be good. And so, I went into it with an open mind. The poster came out. I said, okay, all right, I'm into it. And then, you could listen to all my thoughts when the first trailer came out. The first trailer came out. I was not into it. I did not like the images that I was seeing. I did not like what appeared to be the tone of this movie. I had a bad feeling. I swallowed it for the second trailer. I said, okay, this is much different, much better. It's giving away the twist, which I wish that hadn't. I would have liked for the change that they made. I would have liked for me to have gone into that fresh. But I liked the second trailer. And I liked the second trailer enough for me to be really excited to anticipate this movie coming out. I wanted to like it. I wanted to see it. I was very, very excited, and I was upset when I couldn't see it on opening night. Not necessarily just for the purposes of this podcast, but I just, as a Stephen King fan, I just wanted to see the new Pet Sematary movie. I like going out to see horror movies with my wife. And so on Sunday night, we went out and had a great time in the theater. We had a great, night out with some friends at dinner beforehand. So it was just a nice night. I really enjoyed my time out. And I'm going to get through my positives that I had with Pet Sematary before I move into some deeper thoughts about the Pet Sematary. So I'm going to start with something nice. So the first thing that I would say is Church. The look of the cat and the attitude of Church really, really cracked me up. I liked Church, the cat, especially when he was eating the bird in in Rachel and Lewis's bed. That was purposefully and intentionally funny. Which there are definitely moments of humor in this movie, some unintentional. But this definitely was one that was intentional, and it cracked me up. And I already mentioned the change, and spoiler alert for the movie. But the change of the child that dies is a good one. I applaud them for making that change. Whenever you make a change to a novel or a source material or a remake, you always invoke the wrath of fans. So for them to make this change, knowing that it was going to, ruffle some feathers, I applaud them for that. I like the change. And I like their reasoning for the change, to keep us off guard, and just in terms of filmmaking and in terms of just what they can do, having a little toddler and an animatronic doll running around in place of the toddler we've seen it, and it runs the risk of not being frightening on screen. Conceptually, it's horrifying. On screen, no. So yeah, I get that. I totally get that, and it allowed for a really good fake out in the trailer. And if we hadn't seen the trailer, it would have made for a really good fake out in the movie. So I'm totally into it. And then there was a fake out in the movie. Like they played with expectations in the movie, which I really, really liked. I mean, Victor Pascal warns Lewis about his upcoming destruction, and this is immediately followed by Church in Gage's crib in a very, very effective, very, very quick scene. I think with like a handheld camera, and it goes by quick, and there's an immediacy to it, and there's a danger there, and there's just a sense that something is wrong in their world, and all that was captured very, very effectively, very, very quickly. Then we had the Gage's drawings, and so we think that, he's telling his own, foreboding future. And then Gage ultimately walks into the road. And when I saw Gage walk into the road, I thought that there was a twist upon a twist. I thought that that the marketing had fooled me into thinking that there was an actual change, and that, no, when you actually plop your butts in the seats, that you're actually going to see Gage die again. But unfortunately, for Ellie, she's the one that passes away. But that was, even to have Gage until that moment, to have the audience, think that Gage is about to die, to swerve, they kept it going right until the very, very end. And so I give them credit for that. And then there's something very special about seeing Lewis grab and save Gage. It's like it's on another level of the tower. He understands that he saved him. He finally saved him. But it's like a horrible punchline to some dark joke. That in the end, Gage is really the only survivor in this story. So I'm totally fine with the change, and I like the fake out and the way that they played with the audience in implementing that change. I also like the fact that Lewis is directly responsible for Ellie's death, and that adds a level of guilt to him and the decisions that he makes. If he had just killed Church like he originally wanted to, and instead he tries to dump him off, and it's only when Church returns from the state park in the middle of the road that lures Ellie into the road where she is killed, that's what causes it. But if he hadn't dumped Church and he had just injected Church, then that wouldn't have happened. The cinematography of the movie was spot on. I thought that it just looked great. Speaking of which, the look of the burial ground specifically, I don't want to call it the Micmac burial ground because it's not. It's not named the Micmac burial ground. In fact, they kind of shy away from that concept of the Indian burial ground. They mentioned the Native Americans that had lived around the area but had fled because they had recognized that something else lived in the woods, and the woods belonged to that. So the burial ground as it existed, I really liked the look to it because it looked like when Lewis and Judd walked through the woods, they emerged somewhere else. It just didn't look like it was in our world anymore. And I liked that. I thought that was a cool... we don't see like another moon or alien stars. But it just, it just kind of looked like an alien planet. And I liked the idea of them, as they were walking through the woods, crossing into another reality. So I was into that. The fact that we see like the Wendigo hiding in the mist, which in of itself kind of, I'll get to Stephen Kingisms and Easter eggs later, but it kind of feels like a shout out in a way to the mist. But that was a really creepy, effective moment of this hulking, towering creature in the distance in the mist, and you're not quite sure what you see. Okay, speaking of the mist, spoiler alert, strangely enough, for Shazam. Pet Sematary is the second movie that I saw this weekend. Shazam was the first. There are at least 2 Stephen King homages, coincidences, but there are, spoiler alert again for Shazam, in the Rock of Eternity, there are doorways, just like the Dark Tower series. And it's great to see it in action. We were denied it in the Dark Tower movie, but we get it in Shazam, okay, of characters opening a door and seeing another setting outside of the door, and the frame outside of the door is not attached to anything. It's such a cool visual. And it's a shame that we didn't see it in the Dark Tower movie. So we get the doors, and when one of the characters opens a door, there is nothing but mist within the door until a very familiar tentacle reaches out from the door and tries to attack the character. And the tentacle, it opens up, okay? And it has, very familiar looking teeth, and it's just straight out of the mist. It was great. It was a great little Stephen King moment. So between the Stephen King references and hey, the Ramones, there's a couple things linking Pet Sematary to Shazam this weekend, so that was pretty fun. So I did like the Wendigo in the Mist, and then I also liked one particular moment in the movie of after Ellie's resurrection of Lewis trying to wash and comb Ellie's hair. I thought that it was very effective. I thought it was very disturbing because it was something so natural and so tender in a very normal setting, and it was just corrupt. And I think that the movie should have played more to that strength rather than what it gave us, and I'll get to that more. Similarly, the dancing in the living room was almost there. It almost got you get a glimpse of. Basically, that's how my daughter was just acting about 20 minutes ago when she wasn't going to sleep. But something's wrong, right? She had put herself back in the dress, which is creepy. And she's dancing in the living room, but she's not dancing right. I'm into it. I was into that. So more, I think I would have liked more moments like that. I thought it was effective when the death was about to occur and the movie goes silent. The silence spoke volumes. And then after the death, when Lewis and Rachel are lying in bed, and as they're talking, the screen is just flashing to memories of Ellie. Again, it was very reminiscent of the Polaroid scene when Dale Midkiff is screaming no, when Gage had died in the original Pet Sematary movie. It's very, very similar. Maybe an homage, maybe a shout out. I don't know. But again, it's effective, and I think that the movie could have used more like that. I'm going to talk about grief later on, but this was a good way to show, because I don't want to project onto anyone that has lost a child. But I would feel that if I lost a child, there's nothing that I would be able to think of other than my child in wherever I was. So to have scenes just be constantly interrupted with flashes, I think that it would be a great surrealistic way to show the emotional state of our characters. I liked that moment. I wish we got more along those lines. Okay, so those are the positives for Pet Sematary. Here are my thoughts that tend to be negative. This is a very by-the-numbers, rushed, plot-driven movie where it needed to be, in order to be successful, a character-driven movie. I had reservations, as I said earlier, when I first saw the trailer, and I wanted to like it. I just can't. And it took me, I'm fine actually that I took a couple days to release the podcast, because it gave me time to think about it and really articulate my thoughts. But yeah, this needed to be a character-driven movie. And the Mary Lambert 89 movie is way more character-driven, even though they both follow like the same. It's the same. It's for all the changes, and I'll get to that. It's basically the same movie, but it's just done better in the 89 version. And I know I shouldn't criticize it for what it's not, and I should just judge it for what it is. And I said this in the last review when I reviewed the trailer for it. But I shouldn't fault it that it's not Hereditary. But it's hard to not make that comparison when Hereditary has similar subject matter, and Hereditary is a divisive film among horror fans, because a lot of horror fans out there don't find it scary, but I think that depends on what you think horror is, and there's different kinds of horror for sure. And I think that the horror that the way in which you create a horror movie or a horror story or whatever your methodology needs to reflect whatever the content and the story itself that you're trying to tell. If you're telling a story about death, specifically the death of a child, and the fact that the death of a child is symbolic for despair, the destruction of a family, the complete corruption of potential and dreams and life and hope, then you do something more and deeper and more profound than just jump scares. And we get a very jump scare heavy, surface level horror when I believe that we should have gotten a meditative, grief-stricken, emotionally wrought, emotionally challenging movie that affects the audience into more emotions than just scared. I don't want to be scared. I wanted to be affected. This is a movie that I was primed for, all right? During the course of this review, I had to go tend to my kid about 3 or 4 times, all right? There isn't a moment of the day where I'm not thinking about her. When my wife and I are able to go out to dinner, we think about her. We talk about her. And even though we're gone and we just saw her like 15 minutes before, we miss her, right? It's natural. So the movie about the death of a child, this should have devastated me. And I felt nothing. And I think that that speaks volumes onto the failings of this movie. Because it wasn't a character movie. These aren't characters. They're caricatures. They're ciphers where characters should be. Now, the thing I think that actually kind of got me angry was the bedtime scene. It's funny that I'm talking about this again, when my daughter wasn't going to bed. Anyone that has parents, ask any parent what bedtime is like for their child. Whoever the parent is, you're going to get a different version of it, but it's going to be, it's going to involve different rituals that are specific to that particular family, different idiosyncrasies. I mean, for us personally, I usually put her to bed, and it involves us, cuddling in, my and my wife's bed with her for a little bit, watching some TV, reading a book, just relaxing, then brushing teeth, going into her room. Now that she doesn't have the crib, she's obsessed with all these different lights that we have in the room. She likes the lights on. I do some reading. I sing very specific songs to her. And then the night concludes with me and her saying, I tell her I love her, but there are other ways to convey that with very just idiosyncratic terminology that we use that's specific to me, to her, and my wife. Just little inside jokes, Stephen Kingisms for us, right? That, no one else would get. But it's part of the ritual. It's part of the routine. Because that's our family, and that's what we've done, and it's unique to us. Other families have their own, okay? Do we get that in this movie? No. You know what we get? We get Jason Clarke telling his daughter, I love you, go to bed. And then he leaves the room, okay? That just rang so false to me because it was a scene that dictated that the characters needed to have a conversation about church and not wanting church to come into the room. And it was a perfunctory scene that just got to the point and left without actually making me believe that this was a father saying goodnight to a daughter. And yes, granted, the daughter is older than my daughter, but I still did not buy it. Okay? I didn't buy it at all. Saying, I love you, go to bed. That's the least of what you can do in a scene like that, and it just wasn't enough. I mean, for a movie about death, for it to truly work, this movie needs to stop to a halt, a screeching halt where we don't have to worry about plot. We needed to stop before the death to show us what life is like for the Creeds, and we needed to stop after the death to show us what death is like for the Creeds in the aftermath of Ellie's passing. And we just never spend any time with them as a family, of just the creeds being the creeds. I mean, we see these rote little moments. I mean, we see Rachel and Lewis, after first moving there, they get into bed and they're giggling, they're laughing, and oh my God, they're so in love, guys. But I mean, it's so superficial. It is a paint by numbers way to show us that they're a loving couple, right? But it doesn't reveal anything about their life. It doesn't reveal anything about their marriage or their family, and we see Ellie drawing where Lewis discovers the Victor Pascal picture, but that moment is about the plot of the Victor Pascal storyline, not about the family. What are mornings like for the Creeds? What are dinners like? I mean, I'm sorry for me to project so much about, my life onto this, but I mean, as you heard, I mean, my dogs were running around. But when I come back from work and, my wife and I sit down to dinner, the entire dinner is us just trying to have a conversation while at the same time trying to corral our daughter and keep her sitting in her chair and eating and not running away or running to go play with her things, or trying to let the dogs into the kitchen because our diabetic dog can't have food. But if our dogs are not in the kitchen, then they're barking and that's interrupting my wife and I trying to talk. So it's just constant chaos. It's that chaos of family, right? And I'm not saying that this movie needed that, but it needed something to show life and a family being a family, right? And you don't get that with them. I don't know who they are. So how am I supposed to care when a character dies in this movie? Because I don't ever get a chance to see how this dynamic functions as a unit, or who they mean to each other, because they're not really characters. It doesn't mean anything. So I mean, I could go on and on. I mean, like, what are things that families do? And it's going to be different for them because they're kind of in the middle of nowhere. And I'm going to get to that too. But quiet time. Some families do like a half an hour quiet time. Do they do that? Like no screen time. Speaking of screens, like the grandparents are mentioned. How about a scene where maybe they're FaceTiming with grandma and grandpa? We never see any of these characters actually living. We only see them on the plot assembly line. We never see them living their life, and we never see them dwelling in their grief. Another example of just being plot. Zelda, the backstory with Zelda. Sorry, guys. I know she's a popular character. I know that she's an iconic contribution to the horror iconography, but the inclusion of Zelda in this movie, it just never feels organic. To me, it just feels like a box that needs to get checked. I'm going to get into this. I'm going to talk about Rachel at length, which means I'm going to talk about Zelda at length. And guys, for God's sakes, there are a couple scenes that really made me, like I said, laugh out loud. One of them is, it's not Chekhov's gun, okay? It's Judd's gun. It's literally Chekhov's gun. If this was intentional and self-aware, it would be funny, but it wasn't. It's just sloppy. An open drawer with a gun in it, discovered by a 9-year-old girl. It was absurd. It's an absurd moment of cinema. Okay? So I will get more into what the characters could have been, but these are some examples of how this was a plot-driven movie, and it needed to be a character-driven movie. And then we have some performance issues. Now, look, I'm not into melodrama. I'm not. But I could have had some emotion from Jason Clarke. I didn't get anything from him before or after. He played stoic throughout. And, he falls apart visually at the end, but I never give me some emotion, man. I think more and more about the 89 version. And Dale Midkiff might not be the world's best actor, but there's a couple things that he does right that I really like. And I said it last time, I'll say it now. His acting with the kids was tender, it was earnest, it felt truthful. It's those moments that I think actually work. Little moments like that where he's like, I remember him talking to Gage, and I think they were going like, oh no, like something like that. It was really cute, and it seemed of the moment. It just seemed like a father and a son just kind of playing with each other and just being alive with each other and being in the moment together, right? So he was able to do that. His grief, okay, he wore it on his sleeve. I think he just expressed that fragility and complete brokenness very, 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 very well, and just how fragile he was. I don't get any of that from Jason Clarke. And in fact, his Australian accent, like my wife didn't know that he was Australian. I had forgotten that he was Australian. You know, and I liked him in Zero Dark 30. I liked him in Battle of the Planet of the Apes. You know, I don't dislike him as an actor. I was excited when he was going to be in this movie because I liked him as an actor. I just don't know where he was as an actor in this movie. And I kept thinking he was doing something with his voice. Like he was trying to like mumble his words or like eat his words and show like a restrained, kind of like what Eric Bana did in Ang Lee's Hulk, which I believe gets a bad rap. If you watch that movie again and just recognize that Eric Bana is playing someone, he's not really projecting any emotion because he's playing someone that is emotionally rigid. He's refusing to allow himself to express any emotion, hence his issues with Betty. But this is not the Ang Lee cast. It's the Ang Lee Hulk cast. It's the Stephen King cast. I won't go there. But I do like that movie. But no, I mean, like, I don't think Jason Clarke is doing that here. I think that he is... I don't know if it's just a fault of the directors who aren't directing him right. I wonder if these directors have kids or not. And if they don't have kids, I don't think they should have made this movie. But no, I did not get anything from Jason Clarke. Amy Seimetz was fine. I like her as an actress a lot. And from what I had read about this movie, that's another thing. Like when this came out on South by Southwest, like, and it like Twitter blew up. You know, they closed South by with this, and it's all anyone would talk about. And people that I respect, whose opinions I'm usually in line with, like, are raving about this movie. So that kind of got me pumped. And I sat down, and I really wonder if I was watching the same movie. I don't know. I don't know if it was the magic of South by Southwest. I don't know if it was just seeing it in a crowd of critics that just kind of they got swept away in the moment together. I don't know what it was, but they liked it. And they, there was a lot of talk about Amy Seimetz and Jason Clarke, and these performances are great. And I don't know where these performances were when I watched this movie. John Lithgow was fine. I don't like what they did with the Judd character. The more I think about it, they've gruffed him up. And I just don't get it. I think more about the Fred Gwynne, who is playing a cartoon. In that movie, he's playing a cartoon in a bunch of performances of other people. But for God's sakes, I mean, when you think about Pet Sematary, Judd's the first person you think of, and that's all because of Fred Gwynne. And I mean, the accent is so over the top, but it's lovable. You do love that character, and that's a hard death because you have fallen in love with that character. And one of the reasons why you love the character is because he's just genuinely kind. And I don't know why we don't have that. And why in this age we just can't have someone being kind for the sake of being kind and not kind of have him be a little bit scary on the outside, and his house is in a little bit disarray, and he has a loaded gun, and we see him through the eyes of a child in a pet cemetery, and he's a little scary at first, but don't worry, underneath he's a really good guy. Like, why can't he just be a good guy? Like, if you go to Maine, and I've been fortunate enough to have people in my life who are from Maine, who... in the entire time I've known them, they have felt like Judd Crandall. They really do. They literally talk like him, and they're just genuine and kind people. They exist. They're out there, and they do live in Maine. So I don't know why we had to do away with that. John Lithgow could pull it off. I think, again, it was just the direction and the take on this particular character. So... And then with this movie, for all of the talk of the change, okay, and I talked about how I liked the fact that they changed it to Ellie. They just didn't change enough. Okay, there's a child swap for sure, but to me, this movie feels very much like a near beat-for-beat retelling of the original movie, complete with a Rachel monologue about Zelda. I didn't like it in the original movie. I think it's hokey. So I was excited about this movie coming out for the sheer fact that I wasn't going to have to endure a monologue in which a character is telling me all about her backstory and her emotional hangups and her character motivation. And hopefully I would just be able to see it portrayed through more nuance, subtlety, and more organically woven into the story. But no, because this movie isn't confident enough to make bold changes, they even stick with the Zelda monologue. Hated it then, and I hate it now. So, I mean, certain specifics might have changed, but I would say that it's too similar to applaud the changes for being bold or saying something too new. I was conceptually when the trailer came out and I realized that Rachel was going to be in the third act more as an active participant, I was excited. But when I watched the movie, she's still just racing back just in time, only to have a couple minutes at the house. She's still just a passive victim. And the more that I think about it, guys, the more I realize that this really should have been Rachel's movie. Okay, in 2019, after the original novel and after Mary Lambert's movie, why they didn't just make it Rachel's movie and tell the story through Rachel's perspective, that is beyond me. That would have been a bold retelling, telling the story from her perspective. What if we see her trying to deal with being home with a 2-year-old? That's not easy, guys. Having just moved to a new state in the middle of nowhere, away from her family and friends, battling a growing fear of death, spurred by rediscovered memories of a sick and dead sister, a husband so pragmatic he's growing distant. There is a lot of emotional depth to mine from this character, who we never spend any time with. She's on the periphery. As much as she might have some screen time, she is on the periphery of the story itself. It's still Lewis's story. And Lewis is the one that drives them to Maine for a better life. But what is the quality of life of someone who is now just completely excluded from her family, her friends, her life? She's in the middle of nowhere. She doesn't get to hang out with anyone. Like I said, living with a 2-year-old is not an easy thing to do. And her just being overwhelmed by these memories of Zelda. There is a lot to be able to explore there. For her personally, and what this would mean to their marriage and to their family, and to the fact that this is a new start for them. And if it's not going well because one half isn't doing well mentally, and the other one maybe isn't being emotionally supportive and might be swallowing the truth of what's occurring there, there is a lot that you could really do. That would be great to actually watch if it was Rachel's story. A family's starting to grow apart when it was supposed to be given a fresh start. And it would allow Judd to do more. You know why? Let me tell you why. Because Judd would see it happening. He would see this new beautiful family. He would see the friction within it, and something, hey, you know what? Like a cemetery behind the house, a rot in the center, of this family. And that would be the motivation for telling Lewis about the burial ground, thinking that he would be saving the family from unneeded stress due to Rachel's growing obsession and phobia about death. Why let death in the family if you can avoid it? By denying it, repressing it, it only gets worse. You see, this interpretation puts the focus on the characters. It would allow for the actors to share time as characters, inhabiting moments of emotion, of change and life, rather than just firing off plot points moment after moment after moment. I mean, at one point, Rachel tells Lewis, these last few months have been hard. And I was legitimately confused. Like, I had maybe fallen asleep for like a half an hour because I didn't know what they were talking about. Like, it would be nice for us to actually see that. I know, guys, I know that what she was talking about was Pascal. I get it. But the weight of Pascal to me did not seem to be enough to justify that comment. Because it's not character based, and it just skims the surface of the themes, and this is a massive problem for me. The directors are relying on shallow scares throughout the entire movie, over the dread and the anguish and the pain that would have come if they had been more interested in investing time with these characters over the plot. For instance, okay, I literally laughed out loud when Judd and Lewis are hiking to the burial ground. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Lightning flashes. Do you know what I'm talking about? The lightning looked like it should be spray painted on a black van behind a sword-wielding woman in a chainmail bikini riding a white and striped black tiger. You know what I'm talking about? Does that make sense? Does that image stick in your head? That's what the lightning looked like. And my wife turned to me and said, it just looked like they went to Spirit Halloween and picked up just like background decorations and Halloween CDs of like audio. Spooky sounds and lightning in the back. It looked and sounded ridiculously hokey. I mean, we get just shallow scares throughout the movie. Fog. There's a lot of fog. And guys, I like fog. In fact, I've talked about how much I like fog on this podcast before. The movie that comes to mind that did it well, and this movie knows what it is. There's the difference here. It knows what kind of horror movie it is Insidious. There's a ton of fog in Insidious. And that's fun, okay? Because a movie like Insidious, a movie like The Conjuring, these types of movies they're fun scares, right? I had such a good time in the theater watching The Conjuring. The audience was just locked into the same just zone as we watched it, and there was just screams when there's a jump scare. The tension just like would just wring you out, because James Wan just knows how to just build tension for a very fun and cathartic jump scare that makes you scream. And it's the kind of movie where you scream and it's immediately followed by laughter, because it's a roller coaster ride, right? And it's creepy and it gives you chills, but it's very much in the semblance of Halloween, not the movie, but the actual season of it's it's a scary, but it's a safe scary, right? And that's the kind of stuff that it's one type of horror, and it's a horror that I tend to enjoy. But like I said earlier in this podcast, when you're thinking about the content and the themes and the story that you're going to tell, what is the delivery of the horror itself? Is it going to be a series of jump scares with fun horror, okay, where it's going to get you scared in the moment? Or is it going to be something that's going to really keep you up at night with horrific imagery and horrible things happening that stick with you? And I feel like, again, it should have been the latter, not the former here. So don't get me wrong. If there's fog, I like fog. But fog in of itself, it's not enough. You need to do something with it. I love Universal monster movies from the 1940s, all right? They love fog. I love The Wolfman. Ton of fog, right? But it's different. It's a different type of movie. And it should not be a stand-in for horror in Pet Sematary. Again, Zelda. The Zelda scenes were absurd. There was an effective dumbwaiter scene in The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix. Everyone go out and watch The Haunting of Hill House. That is a character-based horror story that has that really explores and the examination of death in not as hard-hitting a way as I wanted this movie to be, but it really makes the characters wrestle with the concept of death. It is character-based and it's fun horror. Okay, it's a great mix-up of these two different kinds of horror, and it includes a dumbwaiter scene. And the dumbwaiter scene in The Haunting of Hill House is really terrifying. It is tense. It is, it's going to stick with you. It might give you some nightmares. You feel for the characters. You question the safety of the characters. You question the safety of yourself. It is done so well. Okay. You don't get this is laughable, the use of the dumbwaiter here. And I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to go there. Okay. I didn't want to talk about it, but I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about those fucking masks. I can't stand those masks. Maybe you might say that I'm really nitpicking. I don't think I am. I think the masks speaks volumes about what's wrong with this movie. When I saw them in the trailer, I had a really bad feeling about those. I had a really bad feeling about this movie. And I couldn't quite articulate it at the time. I just thought it was not what this movie should be. Okay. But to me, what these masks are is the perfect visual for the misunderstanding of the themes and the content of this movie. The fact that they would feel the need to put masks on children shows that they're trying to make a quote-unquote horror movie. When I think that the true horror of children carrying a dead animal to bury it in a child-made pet cemetery, that's the horror. You don't need a mask because children are supposed to be safe. And the reality that children are existing in a world in which death is an inevitability, and the fact that death will come to them most likely first and foremost with the demise of a beloved animal, that is the horror. To hide it behind a mask lessens the impact. Now, I'm not saying that watching a child, like say, carry a bunny through the woods is inherently, woo. It's not that kind of horror. But it's an image that conveys a concept of death. And death is the greatest horror that we have. And when you mix death with childhood, it is deeply disturbing on any level. When you hide it behind a mask, the focus is on the mask, and it's actually making that scene 10 times safer than if you just had a kid having to deal with the fact that his or her favorite animal, or only animal, died. And the fact that he or she is going to bury it like a little adult in a pet cemetery. The fact that there goes the innocence. They are now in the thresher that is life, that one day is going to chew them up. That's the horror, guys, not the masks. The masks is cheesy. The masks is a cheap way to get Ellie to put the mask on for what is supposed to be, I guess on paper, a creepy scene at the end that doesn't have any scares, that isn't really creepy because it's just a murderous little kid killing a person that we didn't really get to know. Right? That's how I feel about it. I just feel like it's a sheen that's glazed over the story for aesthetic that is trying to remind us that it's spooky, that we're in a horror movie. But again, I just think it would work better if it wasn't treated like a horror movie until it was a horror movie. So that's how I feel about the masks. I don't like them. And a couple other things, and these are nitpicks. Like, it starts off with an overhead, sure, and everything looks bucolic and nice, and then we see a house burning. And then we cycle back to that at the end, and we realize that's Judd's house. Why did they burn Judd's house? Like, what are the motivations of this undead family? Like, that, I didn't like any of that. Okay, and I just feel like, yeah, like the ending, it gets really crazy, and it is its own thing. Okay, and again, I like changes, but as long as the changes actually mean something, but where's the logic? And you can argue that it's illogical because we're talking about dead characters, but like, is this Ellie just saying, I am dead, I should have been dead, and now I need my family to be dead with me? Is it that? But it's not Ellie. It's very clearly not Ellie. because we see Judd's wife, right? And it's so like a Wendigo, or just, this horrific thing that is now just mocking both death and life. So what is does it feel the need to reproduce? Does it feel that, because that isn't a thing in the original, right? These undead characters exist to mock and to torment those that were foolish enough to bury the remains of their dead ones. And they come back as mocking, laughing caricatures, silhouettes of people that no longer exist, right? To mock and to torment the living survivors. This is different. This is like when the internal logic of the changes in the end don't add up, because Ellie is killing Rachel, and then she buries Rachel, okay, and then she tries to kill Lewis, but then when Lewis is killing Ellie, Rachel kills Lewis. So why is she trying to kill? My question is, why is she trying to kill Lewis in that moment? Because her whole thing was to just kind of, she hadn't wanted to kill him at that point, right? Like, she is a monstrous thing to just kind of haunt him. Like yes, it's a cool little button at the end when you have this undead family and this poor little Gage, right? But what's the point? I get, like, there's no point to it. Like the conclusion to the original is a man that is in such denial, and he has come full circle to where his wife was about death. Death for him was always natural, and from a far, someone standing on the shores looking out at the distance, where it was just a concept and it wasn't something that was real to him, he could rationalize it. But the second it hit his family, because he had never forced himself to actually think about it, it completely destroyed him, to the point that he was in such denial about it. All right. He is going to continue to make the same thing until it claims him. That's not here. Like, there was a point to it originally. There's no point here. It is all style over substance. And so it's just a waste of time. And what is, like, the timing is, like, everything about this movie is so fast. Like, I just felt like, how some people listen to podcasts on like 1.5 and 2 point speed. Like, that's what was happening here in this movie. Like, I just felt like they were just fast forwarding through everything that they could have just stopped and talked about. To the point where, like, both Rachel and Lewis are dragged by this little undead girl to the burial ground on the same night in two different occasions, and these people are both resurrected on the very same evening. Just to get to the ending. Just to get to that visual. Please. Okay. So, clearly I didn't like it. And the more I talk about it in this episode, the more I disliked it. And I know that I had... I feel like when I watched the 89 version for the purposes of the podcast, I'd surprised myself in how much I didn't like it as much as I thought that I had. Because I had good memories of it. And so I remember watching it and being like, this isn't holding up to me. But since then, even though I watch it again with a very critical lens and for purpose, in the years that have passed since then, I don't remember anything that I disliked about it. I just kind of remember everything that I liked about it. And I am not going to remember really anything about this movie. I don't think many people are going to remember anything about this movie. I don't get any of the accolades that were thrown at it. And it looks like reviews have been mixed since then. But, I mean, I'm jealous of people that are saying that it's one of the best Stephen King adaptations. I mean, I guess if you count like the Steven Weber Shining miniseries, if that's what you consider a good adaptation, then maybe this is one of the best adaptations. But for me, someone that feels that Stanley Kubrick's The Shining is a fantastic adaptation. Clearly, this is not in my wheelhouse. This movie, I think, failed to do something new. I think that by making changes and not fully committing to what those changes could mean and not living with those changes, I think it just fails. I think it's a big dud of a movie. I mean, even in It, which I would argue that needs to convey a lot of plot. The fact that they gave us moments of the kids just being kids, like in the room, they had the Backstreet Boys, New Kids on the Block moment of them just being kids, of them jumping off the cliff into the water, just swimming around and talking to each other. And then just scenes of them riding their bikes. We were just able to watch them be alive and just living their life. And we also got them to do all the plot stuff, looking for Georgie, going into the sewers, being attacked by Pennywise. We had, going to the house on Neibolt Street. We got all that. But more important than that, we got to see them being friends. We got to see them being alive. So modern movies can do this. We just saw it happen. And I think there's a direct correlation with the boom and the success of Andy Muschietti's It, and the fact that we got to know them as characters and spend time with them as characters. I mean, because one of the more fragile moments from It is Bev and the blood coming out of the sink, right? It's horror, yes, but it's also so much about her reaction to it, right? And what it means for her. Okay, a girl that's going through puberty, that's having her period, that is growing up to just be literally doused in blood. It's a character beat that is also horror. It isn't a plot horror beat. Okay, clearly I don't like this movie. I don't need to dwell on it that much longer. There's some Easter eggs that I want to get to. First of all, there's Cujo, and this was in the book. At Ellie's birthday party, hilariously enough, you hear Judd talking about a Saint Bernard that got rabies, which is, I just want to kind of hire Judd out to attend birthday parties. And then we have The Doors. Much like I was just talking about Shazam, Lewis steps through doorways that take him elsewhere. And I think that the visual specifically was an homage to The Dark Tower. While driving back to Ludlow, there was a sign for dairy on the highway, so that is a shout out, of course, to Stephen King's most famous city. And then we have on the map Little God Swamp. Little God, okay, is a reference to the Cantas, which were first referred to in Desperation.
All right, everyone. So those are my thoughts on the 2019 version of Pet Sematary. If you have any thoughts on my thoughts of the 2019 version of Pet Sematary, write into stephenkingcast@yahoo.com. You can follow me on Blue Sky, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. And if you have any time on your hands, leaving a review on any of the podcast platforms that you use to listen to the Stephen King Cast would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, everyone. All right, everyone, that's all that I have for this week. So may you have long days and pleasant nights, and I'll see you here next time where MOON spells Stephen King Cast.